The poison was flawless, silent, lethal, guaranteed to kill. She tasted it and kept eating. The assassin smiled until the human stood up. That was the moment diplomacy ended. The diplomatic feast. The observation deck of Harmony Point Station offered a view that had humbled kings and emperors from 100 worlds. Stars stretched endlessly in every direction. Their light filtered through the station's crystalline dome into soft, welcoming colors. Ambassador Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the window for a moment before the dinner, her reflection a ghost against the cosmic backdrop. She wore the formal diplomatic attire of Earth, deep blue with silver accents that caught the light like captured starlight. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style that suggested competence rather than vanity. Sarah had negotiated treaties on 17 worlds. She had prevented 2 wars through careful words and patient listening. She had learned to read the body language of species that did not even have bodies in the way humans understood them. At 42 years old, she was Earth's most experienced diplomat, sent to the most delicate negotiations because she understood something fundamental about diplomacy. It was not about winning. It was about finding a path where everyone could walk away with dignity. Tonight's dinner would determine the future of human expansion into the Volcari trade networks. The Volcari Empire controlled shipping routes through 7 sectors, routes that could cut Earth's travel time to distant colonies by months. But the Volcari were old and proud, suspicious of the young species that had seemingly appeared overnight in galactic terms. They had agreed to this meeting only because Sarah had spent 3 years building trust with their diplomatic corps, learning their language, studying their culture, showing them that humans understood patience. The dining hall was magnificent in its simplicity. A long table of polished stone sat beneath hanging gardens that grew plants from 24 worlds, their mixed fragrances creating something entirely new. The Valkyrie had chosen this neutral station specifically because it represented cooperation between species. 12 beings sat around the table now, 6 human and 6 Valkyrie, with Sarah at one end and High Chancellor Vorath at the other. Vorath was old even by Volcari standards, his scaled skin carrying patterns that indicated centuries of life. His eyes were intelligent and watchful, missing nothing. He had fought in wars before humans had even discovered fire, but he had also built the trade empire that now sustained billions. Sarah respected him deeply, and she hoped that respect was mutual. The first course arrived on plates that adjusted their temperature to match each species' preferences. Sarah ate carefully, noting how the Valkyrie watched her manners, checking that humans understood proper dining etiquette. She had practiced for weeks, learning the subtle signals that indicated appreciation without rudeness, enjoyment without excess. The second course featured delicacies from Valkyrie worlds, ingredients that had traveled light years to reach this table. Sarah tasted each one mindfully, aware that every bite was a small act of diplomacy. Beside her, Commander James Park, head of Earth's merchant fleet, discussed shipping protocols with the Valkyrie trade minister. The conversation flowed in multiple languages, translators working seamlessly to bridge the gaps between worlds. The third course arrived in crystal bowls that seemed to float above the table, held by gravity manipulators so precise they were invisible. The dish was a Valkyrie specialty, a soup made from aquatic plants that grew only in the deep oceans of their homeworld. Sarah lifted the spoon to her lips and tasted carefully. Something was wrong. The flavor was correct, the temperature perfect, but underneath there was something else. A bitter note that did not belong, chemical and sharp. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities in the fraction of a second before she swallowed. Her training kicked in automatically, the enhanced awareness that came from years of working in dangerous situations. She had spent time with Earth's intelligence services before becoming a diplomat, learning to read dangers that others might miss. The poison was subtle, designed to kill slowly and look like natural causes. Probably a cardiac agent that would trigger what appeared to be a heart attack in several hours, long after the dinner had ended. The assassin had planned carefully, choosing a method that would create plausible deniability. But they had not accounted for human biology's remarkable ability to detect toxins. an evolutionary advantage from ancestors who had survived by learning what was safe to eat and what would kill them. Sarah took another spoonful of soup, her face showing nothing but polite appreciation. Her heart rate had increased slightly, her body already mobilizing defenses against the poison. She could feel it beginning to work, a cold sensation spreading from her stomach. But she also felt her immune system responding, her liver and kidneys working overtime to process the toxin. Humans had survived countless poisons throughout their history, developing remarkable resilience. She could not alert anyone yet. If she showed distress, the assassin might panic and strike more directly. Others could die. The delicate negotiations could collapse. Worse, it might start a war if the Valkyrie thought Earth was accusing them of attempted murder. Sarah needed to identify the threat, neutralize it, and preserve the peace all at once. So she smiled and continued eating. Her eyes scanned the room without seeming to, taking in every detail. The Valkyrie delegation showed no signs of alarm, which meant either they were innocent or perfect actors. The human team remained relaxed, unaware of the danger. The servers moved efficiently between courses, their movements practiced and professional. But one stood slightly apart. A Valkyrie in service uniform who watched Sarah with unusual intensity got there. The fourth course arrived. And Sarah noted that her plate was identical to everyone else's. The poison had been in the soup specifically, not in anything prepared for the entire table. That suggested the assassin had limited access, perhaps only during the preparation of that single course. It also suggested they were working alone, unable to corrupt the entire kitchen staff. The conversation continued around her. High Chancellor Vorath was discussing trade routes with the human delegation, his deep voice carrying authority built over centuries. Sarah participated when appropriate, her words clear and thoughtful despite the poison now spreading through her bloodstream. She could feel her enhanced metabolism fighting it, breaking down the chemical compounds. But it was a battle being fought cell by cell. The fifth course came and went. Sarah ate everything placed before her, maintaining perfect diplomatic composure while her body waged war against death itself. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but in the warm dining hall, that could be attributed to the temperature. Her hands remained steady as she used her utensils. Though her muscles were beginning to ache from the strain by the sixth course, Sarah had identified 3 facts. First, the poison was definitely targeting her specifically, which meant someone wanted to stop these negotiations by removing Earth's chief diplomat. Second, the server she had noticed earlier kept finding reasons to stay in the dining hall, watching and waiting for her to show distress. Third, her body was winning the battle against the toxin, though it would be close. The 7th and final course arrived, a sweet dessert meant to cleanse the palate and end the meal on a note of harmony. Sarah ate every bite, watching the server's growing confusion. She should have been showing symptoms by now, perhaps even collapsing. Instead, she was finishing her meal with evident enjoyment. Discussing the complexities of interstellar trade law with a Valkyrie minister, when the last plate was cleared away, Sarah stood and bowed to High Chancellor Vorath in the Valkyrie manner, expressing gratitude for the meal and the hospitality. The old Chancellor returned the gesture, his eyes showing something that might have been approval. The formal part of the evening was ending, with guests beginning to mingle in smaller groups for continued conversation. Sarah excused herself politely, citing a need for a brief respite before the evening's final discussions. She walked toward the exit with measured steps, aware that the suspicious server had slipped away moments before. Her body was screaming now, the poison still working despite her defenses, but she could not afford to show weakness. Not yet. The game had entered its final phase. The assassin knew their poison had failed, which made them desperate and dangerous. Sarah needed to find them before they could try again or escape entirely. And she needed to do it while her body fought to stay, conscious against a toxin that should have killed her an hour ago. She stepped into the corridor beyond the dining hall, and the hunt began. The hunt and justice. The corridor outside the dining hall stretched in both directions, curving gently with the station's rotation. Soft lighting panels cast a warm glow that was meant to be comforting. But Sarah saw only angles and shadows where an assassin might hide. Her enhanced hearing picked up footsteps moving quickly away. the distinct rhythm of Valkyrie locomotion heading toward the garden sector. She followed, keeping her own steps silent through training and careful placement. The poison was still working inside her, but Sarah's body had adapted to the threat in ways the assassin could never have anticipated. Humans were survivors, descended from ancestors who had eaten everything they could find and developed remarkable systems for processing toxins. Her liver was operating at nearly twice its normal capacity, her kidneys filtering her blood with desperate efficiency. She could feel the battle at a cellular level, her immune system identifying and destroying the foreign compounds molecule by molecule. But biology alone was not enough. Sarah had also trained her mind to overcome physical limitations, learning meditation techniques that allowed her to compartmentalize pain and continue functioning. She used the techniques now, acknowledging the burning in her veins while refusing to let it control her actions. The poison existed in one part of her awareness. The mission existed in another. She kept them separate through sheer force of will. The garden sector of harmony. Point was one of the station's most beautiful areas, a carefully maintained ecosystem that represented cooperation between dozens of species. Trees from Earth grew beside flowering plants from Valkyrie worlds, their roots sharing soil that had been engineered to support multiple biologies. Water features provided humidity while filtering air through natural processes. The sector was usually crowded with visitors, but at this hour it was quiet. Most beings still at the diplomatic dinner or in their quarters. Sarah entered through an archway, covered in climbing vines, and immediately spotted her quarry. The servers stood near a fountain, their back to her, speaking urgently into a communication device. She could not hear the words, but the body language spoke of failure and fear. The assassin was reporting to someone, explaining why the human diplomat was still alive. She moved closer, using the thick vegetation for cover. Her training in covert operations had been decades ago, but the skills remained sharp through constant practice. Every diplomat needed to understand security, to recognize threats and know how to respond. Sarah had gone further than most, learning not just to avoid danger, but to confront it when necessary. The Valkyrie assassin finished their communication and turned, freezing when they saw Sarah standing 10 meters away. For a moment, neither moved. The assassin's hand drifted toward their belt where Sarah could see the outline of a weapon, something small and easily concealed. She held her ground, her own hands visible and empty, showing no aggression despite the murder attempt she had just survived. "You are still alive," the assassin said in accented but clear human English. Their voice carried surprise mixed with something darker, perhaps resignation. "The poison should have killed you within the hour. How are you even standing?" "Humans are difficult to kill," Sarah replied calmly, though her legs were trembling with the effort of remaining upright. "We evolved on a world that tried to poison us every day. Our bodies learned to adapt or die. Your toxin was sophisticated, but not sufficient." The assassin's scales rippled with what might have been respect or anger. "You knew? During the dinner, you knew you had been poisoned. Yet you continued eating, continued talking, showed nothing? Why? Because I needed to identify you without causing panic. Because accusing your entire delegation of attempted murder would have destroyed years of diplomatic work. Because I hoped we could resolve this quietly and preserve the peace that both our species need." Sarah took a slow step forward, fighting against the dizziness that threatened to overwhelm her. "Who sent you? Who wants these negotiations to fail?" The assassin's hand closed around their weapon. "There are those among my people who believe humans are a threat. You expand too quickly, claim too much, ask for too many concessions. We were great when you were still living in caves. Now you demand equality, partnership, respect you have not earned through centuries of civilization." "Respect is not earned through age," Sarah said quietly. "It is earned through actions, through keeping promises, through treating others with dignity, regardless of how long they have walked among the stars." She took another step, her vision blurring at the edges, but her voice remaining steady. "You tried to kill me because you fear what humans represent. Change, new ideas. A future where old empires do not automatically command simply because they are old. The weapon came out small and deadly, designed to fire projectiles that would punch through flesh and bone. Sarah saw it rising toward her and knew she had seconds to act. Her body was failing, the poison winning its slow battle despite her defenses. She did not have the strength for a prolonged fight. She needed to end this immediately. She launched herself forward, using the last reserves of energy her body could provide. The assassin fired, but Sarah had already moved, throwing herself sideways and rolling behind the fountain. Water sprayed around her as projectiles struck the stone basin. Their impact sending vibrations through the ground. Her hand found a piece of decorative rock, smooth and heavy. She came up from behind the fountain and threw it in one fluid motion. The skill coming from years of zero-gravity combat training where any object could become a weapon. The rocks struck the assassin's weapon hand with a satisfying crack, sending the gun spinning away into the vegetation. The Valkyrie rushed forward, claws extended, relying on their natural weapons now that the gun was gone. They were larger than Sarah, stronger under normal circumstances, but these were not normal circumstances. Sarah had survived the poison through sheer determination, and that same determination now drove her forward to meet the attack. They collided among the flowering plants, grappling for advantage. The assassin's claws raked across Sarah's shoulder, drawing blood, but she twisted away and drove her elbow into their throat in a strike. That would have killed a human, but only staggered a Valkyrie. She followed with a knee to their midsection, then grabbed their head and drove it down into her rising knee a second time. The assassin stumbled back, dazed. Sarah pressed the advantage despite her body screaming in protest. She swept their legs out from under them and followed them down, her weight pinning them to the ground. Her hands found pressure points she had learned from Valkyrie self-defense instructors, knowing exactly where to apply force to immobilize without permanent damage. "Yield," she gasped, her strength finally giving out. "Yield now, or I will be forced to hurt you further." The assassin struggled for a moment longer, then went still. "You should have died," they whispered with something like awe. "The poison should have killed you. How are you still fighting?" "Because I had to," Sarah replied simply. "Because others were depending on me. Because giving up is not in human nature." She could hear footsteps approaching, station security finally responding to reports of the disturbance. Because sometimes the only way to prove you deserve respect is to refuse to die when someone tries to kill you. Security arrived to find Earth's chief diplomat sitting in a flower bed, covered in blood from a dozen cuts, holding an unconscious Valkyrie assassin with the last of her strength. Medical teams rushed forward, scanners immediately detecting the massive amount of toxin still present in Sarah's system. The doctors were astonished she was conscious, let alone capable of subduing an attacker. They loaded her onto a medical transport, treating the poison with advanced antitoxins while simultaneously addressing her injuries. The chief medical officer, a being from a species known for their healing abilities, examined the readings with disbelief. "Ambassador Chun, your body metabolized nearly 70% of the toxin on its own. The amount you were given should have killed any being 3 times over. How is this possible?" Sarah managed a weak smile from the transport bed. "Humanity spent millions of years learning to survive on a death world. We ate poisonous plants and developed immunity. We faced predators and learned to fight. We encountered diseases and built immune systems that could adapt. You see a diplomat, doctor? But underneath, I am still the product of the most competitive evolutionary environment in known space. We learned to survive because anything else meant extinction." High Chancellor Vorath arrived at the medical center within the hour, his ancient face grave with concern. He stood beside Sarah's bed as the medical team worked, his presence a silent statement of support. When the doctors finally confirmed she would survive, he spoke. "Ambassador Chun, I owe you an apology and an explanation. The assassin was a member of a radical faction within my empire, those who fear change and progress. I was not aware they had infiltrated my delegation, but that ignorance does not excuse the attack on your life. On behalf of the Velkari Empire, I offer our deepest regrets and our commitment to justice. Sarah, now sitting up with medical supports helping her battered body, met his eyes with understanding. High Chancellor, one fanatic does not represent an entire species. I know this because humanity has its own fanatics, those who would reject cooperation with aliens out of fear or prejudice. What matters is how we respond to such acts. Will we let them divide us, or will we stand together and prove that cooperation is stronger than hatred? The old Velkari was silent for a long moment. Then he made a gesture of profound respect, one reserved for warriors who had proven themselves in the most difficult battles. The trade agreement will be signed tomorrow, Ambassador Chin, and I will add a clause that was not in the original negotiations. The Velkari Empire formally recognizes humanity as an equal partner, entitled to full rights and privileges within our trade networks. You have earned this through your actions tonight, through your courage and your wisdom. Sarah felt tears threatening but held them back through diplomatic training. Thank you, High Chancellor. That means more than you know. No, Ambassador. Thank you. You could have revealed the poisoning during the dinner, could have accused us publicly and destroyed our reputation. Instead, you protected the negotiations, caught the true culprit, and preserved the peace. That is the mark of a true diplomat. That is the mark of a species worthy of respect. 2 days later, Sarah stood in the observation deck once more, looking out at the stars. Her shoulder was bandaged, her body still recovering from the poison and the fight, but she was alive. The trade agreement had been signed that morning in a ceremony attended by representatives from a dozen species. The assassin would face Velkari justice, tried by their own people for betraying diplomatic protocols. Commander Park joined her at the window. You know the whole galaxy is talking about you now, right? The human who was poisoned finished her dinner, then hunted down and defeated her assassin. They are calling it the most metal diplomatic incident in galactic history. Sarah laughed, wincing slightly at the pain in her ribs. I was just doing my job, James. Diplomacy is not always about fancy words and negotiation. Sometimes it is about showing others what you are made of, proving that you will not be intimidated or destroyed. Sometimes the best diplomacy is simply refusing to die. The other species are taking notice, Park said seriously. They see that humans are not just good at fighting or building or exploring. We are good at surviving, at adapting, at finding ways to overcome obstacles that should be impossible. That scares some of them, but it also earns respect. Good, Sarah replied, watching a transport ship dock at the station in the distance. We are not trying to dominate the galaxy or prove we are better than everyone else. We are just trying to show that we belong here, that we deserve our place among the stars. And if that means occasionally taking a poison and beating up an assassin, well, I suppose that is just part of the job description. She turned from the window, ready to return to Earth for the recovery her doctors insisted on. Behind her, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere among them, other species were learning a lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Humanity had arrived among the stars, and they would not be easily dismissed, intimidated, or destroyed. They were survivors, and that made them the most dangerous and most valuable allies anyone could ask for. The diplomatic dinner on Harmony Point would be remembered not as an assassination attempt, but as the moment when the galaxy truly understood what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. They would finish their meal. They would hunt their enemies. And they would do it all while maintaining perfect diplomatic courtesy. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. The ability to be both civilized and savage, both gentle and fierce, both willing to talk and ready to fight, and the galaxy would never forget it.